Hi, my name is Reuben. In this series of videos, I'll walk you through the sample Pool Doctors application that I developed for the introduction of Gennaro Mobile. In this particular video, I look at what I call the list CRUD pattern. So it's where we list a number of records and then we can do some CRUD type action. So create, update, delete a row from the database table that's displayed on that list. And that pattern's repeated in the job detail list, job note list, job photo list, and job timesheet list. 4GLs and accompanying forms. So they're in the folder 10, 20, 30, 40. The code in each of these functions is fairly similar. We've got a list 4GL and form, and we display list of values and then allow the user to select one, which we will in turn update, append, update, or delete. So if I just run the application so you can see where we're talking about, if I go into a particular record, and then so lines, photos, notes, and timesheet, I can come in there and we can display a list of records. And from those particular lists of records, we can add another record, or we can update a particular record, or we can, the right to left gesture, we can then delete a record as well. So this list grid, what I call the list grid pattern, is very similar to the list drill pattern we saw earlier here. So with our lists, we saw earlier, we can change the value, change the order, filter the values. Depending on the data, we can do the same thing with each of these CRUD list patterns. So the list of job details, we can control whether we display the product code or the product description. So each of these, what I call, the four job detail type lines, so the lines, job photos, job notes, type timesheet. Each, depending on the functionality, we can change what we see on those screens there, but mainly it's just this lines one. I've got some functionality to change whether you know the data codes or whether you know the descriptions for each of those products. So the code is very similar to what we saw earlier with these job lists. So if I look at the job detail list code, so we've got our 4FD, our form structure, and that form is practically identical. In fact, it is identical to what we had earlier with our job header list. So toggle, oops, make sure I'm talking between the same two. The only thing that's changing is the name of the form. Inside the 4GL, again, a very similar structure, defining some types for the particular record, so the job underscore detail record. I'll just make that point here as well. So the four tables that are all very similar. They're the four detail tables belonging to job header. So we've got our job header detail, job header table, we've got our job detail table, job note table, job photo, and job timesheet lines. So that's why they're all similar. They're all details, if you like, of the job header table. So back to the 4GL. Where is it? Job detail list.4GL. Yep. So using our schema for the database, defining a record, a type, and a record to store a number of rows from that table. And then our code follows the same pattern, opening a window, populating the database table, populating the user interface, and displaying the list. With one subtle difference at the top, when we enter the table, we've got two entry points. We can either maintain all jobs, all job details, or we can maintain the job details just for one job. So we pass in the job code number, and then we just set up a filter based on the code that's been passed in, and then going and calling the same function that we'd use for maintaining all the detail lines. So we've entered that. This is our control function. Then we're populating our database, or reading from our database. So that's the select through the cursor, populating the database array. very similar to what we had for the job header list earlier. And then again populating the em_array in a similar process, populating the major column, the minor column, and the image column. Where it starts to differ is once we get into the display array statement. So we've got actions for append, update, and delete. And we can, at the beginning of the program, we say, well, not the beginning of the program, but as we enter the display array, we do a little test and say, okay, if we're allowed to edit the rows, then we can turn off the ability to append or delete the rows. We still allow the update to occur because what we're actually doing is if we can't update the row, then we're just going to view it. Okay, so that's why the update action stays active. And if we look at the display array, we've set our main action as being the update action, and again using the accessory type equals disclosure indicator. And also note accept equals false like the other display arrays, but we've set cancel equals true so that we can cancel out of that list and return to where we were. So displaying our list of parts, we can cancel back to where we've called it from. So inside these actions, the append, update, and delete actions, with the append and updates, we're going off to a grid record, a grid type operation which we'll look at in another video, but that basically enables us to add one record or update the existing one. The key thing for us to note in our list pattern is when we come back from those functions whether there's any error, in which case we display the error. Otherwise, everything went okay, in which case we either have to add another row to our list and repopulate that row, or we simply just repopulate that row. If we're doing an update, we don't have to add another row. We just say, hey, the key thing is to change the value that's displayed in the row because the user may have changed it when they were updating the row. If they choose to delete, then we go off to the grid pattern and delete the row because there may be a confirmation are you sure you want to delete type dialog on that view, and come back to our list and delete the element from the list. So we're either adding an element to our list, updating the list, or deleting the list based on whether we append, update, and delete. And depending on the functionality, we may have a toggle by, an order by, or a filter inside our code. So I'll just run that again so we can see it. So it's this pattern. We're displaying a list of our job detail lines, or we might be displaying a list of our job note lines, or our job timesheet lines, and they're all got the same, very similar 4GL, using the list, 4FD, and 4GLs. So that pattern we tend to use quite a bit for updating or selecting from a database table, and then we're eventually going to either append, update, or delete from that database table. But if you look at those, what's in those 10, 20, 30, 40 folders, you'll see these list forms and 4GLs got that same pattern going over and over again, where we're opening a window, populating an array from the database, displaying it via a display array, and then closing the window when we're done. And inside our display array, setting our main action with the double click equals update, and our accessory type to be disclosure indicator, so that we see the little chevrons there, and then responding to the actions, whether we're updating, appending, updating, or deleting the row, and a little test to say if we're allowed to edit the row, then we're either viewing it, appending, or deleting it. But if we're not allowed to edit the row, then we're just going to simply view the record instead of updating the record. Okay, so that's the list CRUD pattern, and that's repeated quite a bit through the Poor Doctors application for those various job detail lines.